Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be reviewing the newly released Jessie Ware album titled Superbloom. This was released about a week ago, and I thought I would kind of review this as soon as possible. Sorry I'm a little late. Yeah, this is my first experience with a Jessie Ware album, with listening to it. Even her two even more critically acclaimed albums titled What's Your Pleasure and That Feels Good, I've never heard before, so this is kind of like my ultimate first taste at a Jessie Ware project, which, better late than never. I know those early albums are also kind of filled with, disco and 80s vibe. And so is this one. That's kind of the vibe of this album too. Very, very disco and 80s. But I've noticed that there's also some other genres present. It's kind of like this disco, sometimes R&B mix. I know R&B is a very, very kind of strong genre on this project too that mixes. Occasional like gospel moments, and jazz influences as well. And then there were a handful of tracks that had this electronic and synthy vibe as well, such as Sauna, even Automatic, and Ride. So, a kind of a huge, great mix of a bunch of genres in this album. And the one thing that I do have to say about this album, in general, is that it's very, very cohesive. I'm not sure about her previous albums, but it is very, very cohesive. I love the mixture of sounds, and they even come together sounding cohesive. We have a ballad such as 16 Summers, and, despite all of the genre blending that she does on this, it ends up sounding pretty cohesive. One of my favorite kind of things that she does on this album is her vocals. Her vocals in particular stand out on tracks such as I Could Get Used to This, Superbloom, 16 Summers, just absolute beautiful vocals on her end. And another thing I really, really liked about this album is the quality of the intro and the outros of her tracks. She kind of hooks her audience in right at the start of the track with an intro, and then the climax and kind of final instrumental part in the outro. I find every single track kind of has a strong intro, strong outro, no matter what you think of the song. So that's one thing that I kind of took away from this, is how strong each intro and outro was in every song. Really, really felt like she took the absolute kind of most care into making these songs. None of them were really half-assed, and the artistry that was shown on this album by Jessie, I'm really, really, really pleased with. Kind of just going track by track here, the album opens with the Garden Prelude, which is a very, very beautiful and low-key intro to start the album. We have these kind of whisper vocals that kind of get us started, with a beautiful kind of piano section in this 48-second intro, and then a quick transition into the second track, which is called I Could Get Used to This. This very, very funky kind of R&B jazz feel kind of reminded me of Chloe and Halle's Ungodly Hour. That is an incredible album, and please check it out if you have not done so already. But a handful of tracks reminded me of Chloe and Halle and what they've done before. Again, I am very unfamiliar with Jessie, so I'm just doing my best with kind of comparing with what I know. You know what I mean? Jessie has probably done this sound way before them, but just using my kind of current frame of reference, that's what it reminded me of, as well as Olivia Dean in a handful of tracks, but in particular Chloe and Halle, and I Could get used to that. I love the strings, and I Could Get Used to This. The post-chorus is incredible. The chorus is a part that I think I'm going to need time with, but and that's kind of one of the things that I've noticed on this album in its entirety, is that overall, I think every single song is strong, and there's no weak tracks on this album. I do find that the hooks sometimes are not as strong as she would want them to kind of come across. You know what I mean? I feel like, her post-chorus and her pre-chorus work, but the main kind of hook part in a lot of these songs I found were not as kind of hard-hitting as I was expecting. Now, maybe that's a me problem, but that's kind of one thing I noticed, that they didn't really get me kind of into the mood as much. I feel like it was more, digest the whole song and not just the main hook, and it's kind of what I took away. Still great regardless. Found that final chorus climax, especially in I Could Get Used to That. I Could Get Used to This. absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's a perfect opening track. I found this song just got progressively better, and, it's an incredible opener, I will have to say. The album moves on to track 3, which is Superbloom. This also has some funky and nice drums to get us started. The vocals on the latter half of the chorus, again, the main hooks don't hook me in right away, but the post-chorus kind of feel, I find that is much more, I don't know, much more to my liking. Again, this song had a gospel hint. It's an absolute beautiful track vocally, one of the most beautiful on the album of Superbloom. Just absolutely stunning. And then that moves into Automatic, which we have this male spoken intro, which was very, very seductive and cool. There was a very, very familiar sample that I can't pinpoint because I went to look online what that sample was, but it was not the one that I was kind of thinking. And if anyone knows that kind of familiar melody or sample or interpolation on Automatic, if they know what that is, because when I searched it up, it didn't show up the song that could have possibly been in my brain. You know what I mean? So I'd be very, very curious to see what sounds similar to Automatic, but very, very great song melodically. Loved the hook. One of the strongest hooks on this album in its entirety. Love the usage of it. The hook, in my opinion, is the strongest part in this song. Not to take away for the rest of the song, but yeah, one of my favorite songs absolutely is Automatic. Just vocally, the catchiness of the hook, everything was done perfectly, especially the melody. I loved whatever she did with that sample there. Great work. And then we go into this next interlude, which takes us into Sauna. This one, again, is one of the more electronic tracks on the album. Such a synthy kind of bass line, super nice and bright. It's kind of a spoke-sung pre-chorus as well, which was a different change because a lot of the pre-choruses on the first 3 songs of the album were kind of very, very sung. This was kind of more of a, it had a level of cunt to it that the first 3 did not necessarily have. One of the things that, I was vibing to Sauna, I loved the hook in that as well. It's just the lyricism. I will put up a couple of lyrics just because I thought the lyricism was questionable on Sauna. Maybe it's one that'll come with time and one that I thought was like, do I like it? I'm not totally sure. But Sauna, one of the best songs on this album, definitely one of the more electronic focused tracks, which is more kind of my bread and butter. We have Mr. Valentine at track number 7. This one had such a funky bass line. Very, very interesting vocal style. It was kind of like unlike anything that was in the first 6 tracks. Love the vocal style that she was presenting us with this song. And one of my kind of only complaints with this song overall is that I wish the hook kind of followed the structure of the intro more. There's a part that only happens in the direct intro and the outro that's only present on those parts, and that was like my favorite part in the song, and I wish that could have been the main hook because that really caught my attention, and then the rest of the song didn't really as much. But outro, super strong outro, just something that I have to say. And then we kind of cooled down the vibe a little bit with track 8, Love You For, which really reminded me of this soothing Olivia Dean type R&B track. The vocals on this one in particular, again, really, really shine on this one. It's a very, very cute and comforting song. Again, this whole album reminds me of, marriage and being comfortable with someone that you love. Very, very raunchy lyrics, but in the best way possible. Like, it's raunchy to the point where, what she's talking about is sexual, but it never gets too explicit. And that's kind of one thing that I'm appreciating about this album is that you can turn it on and it's about kind of this, it's raunchy without getting too insanely raunchy that it's uncomfortable. And that's one of the things that I took away. It's a cute song. Love You For is a very, very cute song. Felt super romantic and one that you could put on for Valentine's Day. Not even Mr. Valentine is fit for Valentine's Day, but this one especially, it feels like a Valentine's Day song. I don't know what it is about it, but it was a really, really cute and beautiful song. And then we go on to maybe the most different song on the entire album, which was a single that was released beforehand, is titled Ride. This is a huge change of pace, very, very much so electronic. Happens to be the most basic lyrically. I didn't find the level of lyricism to be anything too impressive on this track, but it did happen to be the most, out there of production on the album. So, that's very forgiving. The production, again, super bright. The drop, it was kind of more of a drop-focused track than having a sung chorus, which something I can get with. Very, very dancey, perfect for the club. The bridge was a little repetitive, so I wasn't a fan of that bridge. I feel like the song could have been elevated so much more with a more powerful bridge. But yeah, I think this is one of my favorite tracks on this entire album. We go on to Don't You Know Who I Am, which is probably honestly one of my least favorite tracks. So that kind of juxtaposition. Maybe it's because Ride was so good that I was kind of a little let down with Don't You Know Who I Am. Still a very gorgeous sung song, but this is at kind of to the point of the album where I'm like, okay, I've noticed that this album is very, very cohesive. Don't get me wrong, but it kind of sounds a little too cohesive, that some songs are starting to mesh in with the other, and they kind of sound too familiar. I've seen a lot of people that have even listened to her first two albums say that this album in particular is something that she's done before. And while it is good, it definitely seemed to get a little stale. And me, kind of being someone who didn't listen to those first two albums, was also feeling that way. I feel like this album was the perfect length, that it didn't... It kind of, didn't overstay its welcome too much. But I noticed how kind of, almost too cohesive this album was getting. And this is one of the songs where I'm like, okay, it kind of sounds like something that was done earlier on the album anyways. And an even more gorgeous song vocally is 16 Summers, which is kind of another outlier in the track list. Very, very ballady. You could tell she put a lot of effort into this one. This is one of the longer songs on the album, which I really, really appreciated. It felt very Broadway play, very musical-ish. Which is something completely out of left field that I wasn't expecting, but I found that to kind of, really, really help with the kind of dramatic, ballady style. I thought it was really, really fun. Vocally, the absolute most standout track, I do have to say. Very, very emotional at the end of this track. I was feeling some type of way. It kind of made me want to cry. It was just so stunning. And then we're still at 2 tracks left. We hit No Consequences. This one, again, I really like. There was an electric guitar present in the intro and for the most part of this track, which I really, really adored. Very heavily layered vocal hook, and the outro again on this track, very, very impressive. Wasn't too fond of the hook, but the outro again shines again. And again, that's something that I really loved with this album. You can tell the climax and outro for each song was really, really well done. And then we have Mon Amour, which is kind of this more Europe club-y vibe, with the Mon Amour, the French language hook. Really, really like this hook. And again, it kind of just was like, okay, it's a cohesive album, but this kind of meshes into already what has been done in this album beforehand. So that kind of summarizes the album. And at this point, I was kind of a little let down with the closing track. I feel like there could have been some changes made with the track list. Maybe have 16 Summers end it, or a high kind of pace track like Ride. I feel like if the track listing was shifted a little more, I would be kind of left with the album feeling a little bit better about it. But overall, this is a very, very solid album, despite kind of some of my critiques that the hooks are not insanely strong, and at times it feels a little bit too cohesive. But as a first Jessie Ware project, I am very, very pleased with how she managed to kind of blend these genres between disco and R&B, have this kind of very, very heavy dance vibe. Again, lyrically, she really outdid herself. I love the kind of, very, very relationship friendly. It felt very, very, cute, and, just the lyricism very, very much impressed me. And it's one of the things that really, really elevated the experience. It just felt so, the usage of strings in there. Yeah, super, super impressed with this album. I feel like it's a solid 7.5 or 8 out of 10. There's some things that would elevate it for me. But I don't think there's any skips on this album necessarily. There's songs that kind of mesh together, but there's songs that, I would still play. Let me know your thoughts. Again, this is my first experience with the Jessie Ware album, and I think this, is a very, very solid introduction. I would love to check out What's Your Pleasure, because that seems to be the one that most people kind of go towards. I know it was very, very heavily critically acclaimed during the pandemic time, and it's one that I wish I would have checked out when it first came out. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this album. Let me know if there's anything that you disagree with me on. Again, kind of renaming my favorites. I think my favorites are I Could Get Used to This, Automatic, Sauna, Love You For, Ride, and 16 Summers. Those are my absolute favorites. But yeah, absolutely give this one a spin. If you like disco and 80s, kind of this R&B mixture. Really, really fun album. I'll give it a 7.5 to 8 on this album. Thank you so much for watching this review. Again, a little bit different from what I typically do, but I thought I would kind of sprinkle some review, more talkish content compared to my react content. So let me know what you prefer. Obviously, I'm going to keep doing this for some albums because some, I'm just in the mood to listen to it by myself and then give my thoughts afterwards. And this is one that I thought I should do it with. So, again, make sure to feel free to super chat or super thanks if you wish to support me in any way. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already and for more content, and I will see you guys in the next one.